My name is Lieutenant Claire Dawson, United States Navy. And the day I returned home from Pearl Harbor, I found out my father and brother had sold my house. I didn't learn it from a phone call or a letter or even a text message. I learned it the moment I pulled into the driveway and saw a stranger's minivan parked where my old blue Chevy used to sit, and my brother standing on the porch like he was waiting for a parade. He grinned like a wolf. "Guess what, Claire? You're homeless now." For a few seconds, I didn't move. The summer air was heavy thick, with that humid Midwestern heat that sticks to your skin like wet memories. Birds chirped, and somewhere down the street, a lawnmower buzzed like nothing was wrong. Nothing about the day hinted that my life had just been torn apart, except the look on my brother's face. I stepped out of the car in my uniform, the one I wore home to surprise Dad. I thought it would be a moment, the kind you see in reunion videos, online. A father runs arms, open music swells, everyone cries. But instead, my father appeared behind my brother, wiping his hands on a rag, like he'd just finished fixing something that didn't belong to him. He didn't run. He didn't smile. He just nodded, like I was a neighbor from down the street. "Claire," he said, "didn't expect you this early." "Early," I repeated. "You had no idea when I was coming home." He shrugged and leaned against the doorframe, like it was his house, like it had always been his house. But legally, it wasn't. It was mine. Mom left it to me when she passed my name on the deed right beside hers. Dad was supposed to look after it while I served. Instead, he sold it. My brother Ryan crossed his arms proudly. We used the money to pay off my debt. I was in trouble, and Dad said, "Family takes care of family." He smirked, even when some family chooses a uniform over us. I didn't answer. Silence has a way of wrapping around your ribs like armor. Instead, I looked past them into what used to be my mother's living room. A child's backpack sat on the floor, tiny shoes by the rug. A woman's voice echoed from the kitchen, probably the new owner. I swallowed hard. "So you sold it," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like someone else was speaking through me. Dad nodded. "We had to. Your brother was drowning. It was the only way to save him." "There were other ways," I said quietly. Dad's eyes flashed with something anger, shame. It was hard to tell. He stepped forward, pointing a finger at my chest. "Don't you come in here with your medals and your military talk and act like you know better. You weren't here. You don't know what it's been like." He was right. I didn't know. I had been serving halfway across the world, standing on steel decks under a burning sun, counting the days until I could come home, believing home was the one thing I didn't have to worry about. Then the front door opened, and a woman with blonde hair stepped out, cradling a baby. She froze when she saw me. "Is everything okay?" Ryan turned to her like a man playing the hero. "Yeah, babe. This is my sister. She used to live here. Thought she'd come back and take over again." That stung, not because of the words, but because of the way he said sister, like it was an insult, not blood. I smiled, not because anything was funny, but because sometimes smiling is the only thing holding you together. "What's so funny?" Ryan snapped, the smugness fading. "What's funny," I said, "is that you think this house was ever yours to sell." Dad barked out a laugh. "We signed the papers. It's done. You can't undo the past." But he didn't know what I knew. A memory flickered in my mind. Mom sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded over mine, the morning she signed the papers to add my name to the deed. "You'll serve the country, and this house will serve you," she'd whispered. her promise inked in cursive across official lines. I looked at them now, my father and brother, and felt the weight of betrayal settle in like dust on old furniture. They hadn't just sold my house. They'd sold my mother's promise. I need the paperwork, I said. The sale, the deed transfer. Ryan scoffed. We don't have to give you anything. The baby cried. The woman bounced him gently, apologizing to no one in particular. The world felt like it was spinning out of rhythm. I'm going to ask once I said each word, steady as a marching cadence. Show me the paperwork. Dad's jaw clenched. He stepped aside, and Ryan stormed into the house. A moment later, he returned with a stack of documents, tossing them at my feet like trash. There, take it. But you're not getting this house back. I live here now. My family lives here now. I crouched to pick them up, my hand surprisingly steady. I scanned the signatures. Mine, forged. Badly. Almost laughably. They didn't even try to match my handwriting. Dad shifted uncomfortably, like he finally understood what he'd done, not just morally, but legally. You forged my name, I said flatly. Ryan shrugged. It's done. Doesn't matter. Oh, it matters, I replied. I turned and walked back to my car, feeling their stares burning into my back. Not once did I look back. Not once did I let them see me break. I didn't break. Not then. When I reached the car door, I paused and faced them one last time. Dad looked smaller than I remembered. Ryan looked nervous. And the woman, she just looked tired. The house you sold, I said, voice, clear as wind chimes in a storm, was actually never yours to sell. I got in the car, drove away, and I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not yet. I didn't drive far, just far enough to breathe. There's a small veterans park about 10 minutes from my old house, flagpoles, a memorial wall, and benches that always feel too cold, regardless of the season. I parked there and sat under the shade of an oak tree, the stack of forged paperwork on the passenger seat, like a passenger I didn't invite. For a long while, I just watched families stroll by. Grandparents holding toddlers' hands, couples walking dogs, people living ordinary lives without legal betrayal hanging over them like a thundercloud. I tried to picture myself among them. Just Claire from around here, not Lieutenant Claire Dawson, Navy officer with a house-shaped hole in her chest. The wind picked up, rustling the papers. That sound reminded me of Mom, how she used to fold grocery lists like origami, how she handled important documents like they were lace gentle and deliberate. She was the one who taught me details matter, signatures matter, promises matter. Funny how the dead can feel more present in moments like this. I picked up the deed and read Mom's signature. Underneath mine, clear, slanted, unmistakably mine. On the sale contract from last month, there it was, again, except it wasn't. They'd tried to copy it, but the slant was wrong. The tail of the N curled up instead of down. Tiny things insignificant to someone who never cared, but loud as sirens to someone who did. A couple sat on a bench near me. The man wore a Korean war cap. His wife maybe handed him a small thermos. He caught me staring, and instead of looking away, he nodded, like he recognized something in me. Pain, maybe, or the quiet before a storm. You okay, young lady? He asked. I will be, I answered, and I meant it. I needed a place to stay. I checked into a modest, no-frills veterans housing center across town, peeling paint, dented vending machines, but clean sheets and no questions asked. The woman at the front desk, Ms. Hendricks, slid a key across the counter. We appreciate your service, she said softly. like she knew I didn't want to hear it as a platitude, but she said it anyway. Room 12B smelled like lemon cleaner. I sat on the bed with the deed in my lap and called the county recorder's office. The clerk on the line spoke like she'd had a long day, but when I mentioned a forged signature on a property sale, her tone sharpened. "You'll need to bring everything in," she said. "Deed sale contract, any correspondence. And identification. We'll start a record review." Record review. It sounded like the beginning of something. Hope, maybe. Before I could second-guess myself, I searched online for legal help. Most lawyers charge rates that could finance an entire fleet of ships, but one listing caught my eye. Richard Hayes, attorney at law, retired, JAG officer. I clicked. His picture popped up, silver hair, kind eyes, a face carved by years of discipline and exhaustion. He had a quote on the homepage: "Justice without compassion is revenge. Compassion without justice is surrender." I called. He answered on the second ring. "Hayes," he barked, voice sharp enough to cut rope. I explained everything from Pearl Harbor to the forged signatures to the porch confrontation. He didn't interrupt, not once. When I finished, he exhaled a slow breath. "Ms. Dawson," he said, "I don't usually take cases anymore, but I also don't ignore uniforms. Bring me the documents first thing in the morning." "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything." But something in his tone sounded like a first step. That night, I sat on the floor with my back against the bed, the TV on for noise, but nothing registering. I thought about Ryan's smirk, Dad's indifference, the woman on the porch holding her baby. They'd all built a story where I was the villain, where my service was abandonment, where my deployment was selfishness, where my sacrifice was betrayal. That story was about to change. Sleep didn't come easy. When it finally did, memories bled into dreams. Mom laughing in the kitchen, Ryan asking me to tie his shoes before the school bus, Dad teaching me how to change a tire. Then the dream twisted. Ryan grown, hand outstretched, demanding money. Dad pushing a pen toward me. "Sign this," he said in the dream. "Be a good daughter." I woke up drenched in sweat. Morning came early. Golden light seeped through the blinds. I put on civilian clothes, jeans, a simple blouse. Somehow, my uniform felt too heavy now, like armor I didn't need yet. I gathered the papers and drove across town to a repurposed brick building that used to be a post office, now Attorney Hayes' office. Inside smelled like coffee and old wood. Hayes stood when I entered, taller than I'd guessed, his handshake firm but not crushing. "Let's see what we're dealing with," he said. We sat. I laid the forged contract on his desk. He adjusted his glasses, tracing the fake signature with a fingertip. "Sloppy," he muttered, embarrassingly so. I felt my throat tighten. They really thought I wouldn't notice. He looked up. "They didn't think you'd fight back." That landed like a weight in my chest. He pulled more documents closer. "This sale won't stand. They didn't have full legal authority, and your brother committed fraud. Your father may have too, depending on how involved he was." My heart pounded, not in triumph, more like disbelief. "What happens now?" I asked. "We build a case. Quietly. We verify at the county office. We contact the buyer. We pull financials. Then, we decide whether we want this to be a legal victory or a moral one, or both. A legal victory would get my house back, or compensation. A moral victory, I wasn't sure what that looked like yet. I hesitated. I don't want to destroy them." Hayes leaned back. "Revenge doesn't have to destroy. Sometimes it just has to reveal." I thought about that. Reveal. The truth. The lies. The cost of both. He folded his hands. There's another question here. Not just what they did, but why they thought they could. Because I wasn't there. Because I was serving. Because I trusted them. Because I didn't think my own family would betray me. He said he'd file preliminary forms. I thanked him, and this time, the gratitude was real. When I stepped back outside, the air felt different, lighter, sharper, like maybe the world hadn't ended in that driveway. Maybe it had only shifted. I walked to my car and paused. Across the street, the flag at the courthouse fluttered. I stood a little straighter. This was the beginning. The next few days passed, like I was living someone else's life. Papers, signatures, county records, quiet hallways with flickering fluorescent lights. Every step felt like walking across a frozen lake. One wrong move and everything could crack wide open. Instead of screaming, I learned to let silence sharpen me. Hayes met me outside the county clerk's office on Wednesday morning. He wore a navy blazer that had seen better decades and shoes that told stories of courthouse steps and long nights. Today, he said, handing me a manila folder, we're confirming the chain of title and the transfer. After that, we start the clock. The clock, I asked. For how long your brother and father tried to pretend they didn't know what they were doing. We stepped inside. The clerk recognized me from the phone. Her eyes flicked to my chest, looking for a uniform that wasn't there. I could tell she wanted to ask questions, but professionalism held her back. Record review, she asked instead. Yes, Hayes answered. Property transfer, possible fraud. The words hung heavy in the air. Fraud, the kind of word that changes families more than time ever could. The clerk disappeared and returned minutes later with a stack of documents so thick I wondered how our lives fit inside them. Names, dates, notarizations, each line, one thread, in a knot I didn't tie. Hayes pointed with his pencil. There it is, the fake signature. You don't curl your D like that. They didn't even try to hide the tremor in the pen. I stared at the page. My name looked like a stranger's handwriting, wearing my clothes. It's surreal, I whispered. Like I'm watching a crime scene of a life I used to have. It is a crime scene, Hayes said. Paper is sometimes louder than gunfire. We left the clerk's office with copies of everything. The clerk's eyes softened. I'm sorry this happened, she said. Not out of sympathy, but solidarity. Outside, the sky was overcast, like even the sun didn't know how to show its face today. What's next? I asked. Hayes's answer surprised me. We wait. I frowned. I thought we'd file something. Oh, we will. But first, we gather every piece of leverage. Then, we strike, and not with noise, with clarity. He paused, adjusting his glasses. If we come out swinging, the story becomes chaos. If we move with intention, the story becomes truth. I thought about the way Ryan laughed. Dad's shrug, the baby in the doorway, chaos, truth. Maybe this was the dividing line. After the meeting, I drove back to the Veterans Housing Center. Ms. Hendricks was organizing spice jars behind the communal kitchen counter. You look like you're carrying a whole boat on your shoulders, she said. Some days it feels like that, I answered. She slid a cup of coffee across the counter. Black. You look like someone who doesn't need sugar. She was right. That afternoon, I visited the VA hospital. Not because I had to, but because I needed to remember who I was outside of signatures and betrayal. I walked the halls, the faint scent of antiseptic and old stories filling the air. I found myself in the recreation room, where veterans played cards and watched daytime TV. A man with a cane looked up as I approached. "You Navy." His voice was gravel and wind. "Yes," I said. He nodded toward a chair. "Sit. Nobody should stand while carrying that look." I sat. "Family," he guessed. "Yes." "Money?" "Yes." "Betrayal?" The word landed like a stone. He leaned back, groaning at the effort. "Hurts worse than shrapnel. Can't dig it out as cleanly." I swallowed. "How did you get through it?" "I didn't," he said. Then, after a beat, "But I learned to walk with the limp." There was something freeing in that honesty. Not everything needs to be fixed to be survived. Later at the housing center, I spread out every document on the bed: signatures, sale, records, loan balances, email printouts. Hayes advised me to track down. I used sticky notes like battle markers: forge, fraud, illegal transfer, buyer unaware. Each note was a weapon I hadn't asked for, but now needed. I could have called Dad, could have demanded answers, but confrontation is loud. Silence is strategic. Instead, I pulled out the old notebook Mom gave me the day I shipped off navy blue cover gold stars. She wrote one line on the first page: "There is power in quiet. Don't let the world convince you otherwise." So I made a plan in silence. Step 1. Confirm legal status. Step 2. Identify buyer and their knowledge. Step 3. Assess damages. Step 4. Decide outcome, not out of rage, but reason. Revenge, I realized, isn't always about getting back what was taken. Sometimes it's about building something they cannot touch. The next morning, Hayes called. "Found the buyer. They were told you signed everything willingly. They didn't know." I twisted the phone cord around my finger. "So they're innocent?" "Likely, yes. They may become an ally." The idea of the woman with the baby becoming part of this tangled mess made my stomach turn. But innocence is not guilt, even with unwanted footprints inside your life. "Claire Hayes," said his voice gentler, "now this will not be easy, but you're not alone." It's strange how 4 words, "you're not alone," can undo the tightness in your chest more than any legal document ever could. As we hung up, I wrote a 5th step in my notebook: choose dignity. Every time. That evening, I walked by my old street. I didn't stop, didn't let them see me. The porch light still flickered from a wiring issue Dad never fixed. I used to tell him I'd fix it when I got leave. Now that bulb felt like a metaphor, flickering, not broken, just waiting. A neighbor raked leaves along the curb. Mrs. Talbot. She saw me and froze. Then she walked over, lowering her voice. "We didn't know, Claire. People talk, but they don't always know. I'm glad you're back." "Thank you," I said. She squeezed my arm. "Don't let them steal your peace, too." As I walked back to my car, I realized something important. Revenge is not the opposite of forgiveness. Revenge is the opposite of surrender. I wasn't ready to forgive, but neither was I ready to surrender. Not anymore. The Veterans Housing Center became my harbor, at least for now. Not a perfect place, but safe enough to sleep without checking over my shoulder for memories. Every morning, sunlight angled through the blinds and dragged me into another day of rebuilding. It reminded me that sometimes starting over doesn't look like a grand moment. Sometimes it's just a cup of instant coffee and a deep breath. On Monday, I drove to the VA hospital again. Not because Hayes told me to, but because I needed to be somewhere that reminded me who I was outside of betrayal. The director, a woman named Mrs. Warner, with kind eyes and a stern bun that rivaled mine, asked if I could help with patient transport, wheeling veterans to appointments, helping with paperwork, sitting with those who needed company. I said yes. Don't say yes out of obligation, she warned, arms crossed. I'm saying yes, I replied, because I need somewhere to be, while I figure out where I belong. That answer seemed to satisfy her. She handed me a volunteer badge that looked more like a lifeline than a piece of laminated plastic. The first person I helped was a man named Earl, a Vietnam veteran who had fingers twisted by arthritis and a laugh like gravel. He squinted at my badge. Lieutenant, huh? Still feels strange when people say it out loud, I admitted. He chuckled. You earned it. Never apologize for that. We spent 30 minutes talking about life, his cataract surgery, my deployment in Pearl Harbor, how both of us missed coffee that didn't taste like seawater or hospital disinfectant. When we reached his exam room, he squeezed my hand. Don't let what they did define the next chapter, he said. Only you get to do that. On the drive back to the housing center, his words echoed. Only you get to do that. I parked and caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror. Dark circles, skin-pale hair, pulled back in a bun, stricter than the Navy ever required. I softened it a little, not undone, just human. That evening, Hayes called. We're making progress, he said. The buyer wants to talk. I sat up straight. To me, yes. They didn't know the signature was forged. They're upset. They want to make it right if possible. I thought of the woman with the baby, her nerves, the confusion in her eyes. I don't want to punish someone who trusted my family. That's a wise boundary, he said. But trust alone doesn't erase damage. We'll set a meeting neutral location, a diner, or the county mediation room. I agreed. Hayes cleared his throat. And Claire, don't go alone if you feel unsafe. I'm not afraid of them, I said. Being careful isn't the same as being afraid. He was right. I knew that now. Later, alone in my room, I spread out the papers again. This time, not like weapons, but like puzzle pieces. I found Mom's handwriting on an old insurance record, soft loops, careful spacing. She'd always said, paper is memory. Keep it safe. I never understood how deeply she meant that. At 2 a.m., when sleep still wouldn't come, I stepped outside. The courtyard was quiet. Wind chimes, echoing like distant bells. A young man sat on the bench smoking his hoodie up. He noticed me, but didn't speak. You living here too? He asked finally. For now. He nodded. I fell apart when I left the Marines. Couldn't find my footing. Thought my family would help me stand. Turns out they were waiting to see if I'd drown. I sat beside him. We didn't look at each other. It hurts, I said. He flicked ash. Yeah, but I'm learning something. Some people will love you until you stop being useful. And some will love you even when you're broken. You just have to figure out who's who. We sat in silence, two strangers with different wars, same bruises. The next morning, I decided to reclaim something small, something mine. I drove to a credit union that supports veterans and applied for a VA-backed loan, not for the old house, but for a piece of land outside town. Just an acre, enough to build something new when the time came. The loan officer, a man named Bishop, with a tie that didn't match his shirt, scanned my paperwork. You sure, he asked? It's a big step to start over alone. I'm not alone, I said. Not anymore. He nodded and processed the application. I drove out to the land afterward. It wasn't much wild grass, a leaning mailbox, a fence that needed more dreams than nails to stand up straight. But the morning sun stretched across it like a promise. The wind carried the smell of pine and possibility. There in the quiet, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since the driveway. Not a dramatic sob, just tears, like rain, soft, truthful necessary. Not for the house I lost, but for the version of me that believed family couldn't break you. Back at the housing center, I found a letter slipped under my door. No return address. Inside, just one sentence. We didn't know he forged it. The buyer, it had to be. I sat on the edge of the bed, the paper shaking. They didn't know. They deserved the truth too. I took out my notebook, wrote a sixth step. Step 6. Do not trade my character for their choices. The next day, Hayes and I met with the buyer at a diner. The woman sat with her baby and a man beside her, tall, nervous, protective. They apologized. I listened. We'll walk away if we have to, her husband said. We don't want a home built on someone else's pain. Something inside me eased, just a little. I don't want to ruin your lives, I told them. I just need to reclaim mine. They nodded. The baby reached for my sleeve. I smiled. Hayes outlined options: monetary compensation, contract retraction, civil remedy. No threats, no shouting. Just the truth, placed gently on the table like a folded flag. When the meeting ended, the woman whispered, I hope you get your home back. I looked out the window toward the horizon. So do I said. But if I don't, I'll build one. And for the first time, it felt true. The meeting at the diner stayed with me long after the coffee cooled. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because something didn't. No shouting, no threats, no scenes. Just truth being spoken in a place best known for pancakes and tired waitresses. Maybe healing doesn't always come with violins and soft lighting. Maybe sometimes it comes with paper placemats and a baby chewing on a straw wrapper. Hayes wanted to move quickly. Momentum matters, he said, sliding papers across his desk the next morning. If we wait too long, they'll spin their own version. If we move now, the facts speak first. Facts. I used to think facts alone could fix things. Now I know they need a voice. Are we going to court? I asked. Not yet, he replied. First we knock. By we he meant me. He suggested a day when most neighbors would be home Sunday morning. Not to embarrass them, he said, but to make sure you are not alone when you tell the truth. He paused. People behave differently when the world is watching. I spent Saturday preparing, not legally, emotionally. I ironed my uniform, the one I wore home, the day everything fell apart. I checked the shine on my shoes. I braided my hair back into a bun I could have set a compass by. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the woman who slept in her car. I saw someone standing again. I arrived just before 10. The street was quiet, as if it knew to hold its breath. My old house, or the house that should have been mine, sat still, blind shut against the world. I walked across the lawn. I used to mow the grass, now uneven and patchy. Every step felt like flipping pages backward and forward at the same time. Ryan opened the door before I knocked. He looked smaller somehow, like the lies had trimmed inches off him. Dad stood behind him, arms crossed. No smile, no welcome. You shouldn't be here, Ryan snapped. I disagree, I said. Dad glanced up and down the street. 3 neighbors pretended to water lawns. Someone paused while loading luggage into their trunk. The world wasn't watching, but it was listening. What do you want, Dad asked. The truth, I said, and a chance for all of us to stop pretending. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, without invitation, I stepped inside. They didn't stop me. The living room was different. New paint, new furniture, the scent of someone else's life. But in the corner under the mantel, one thing hadn't changed: a photo of Mom the frame. I picked out the week after the funeral. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. Ryan moved to block my view. arms crossed like a shield. "You're not taking this house," he said. "I know," I replied. He blinked. Confusion softened the lines of anger on his face. "You... what?" "I'm not here for the house," I said. "I'm here for the truth." Dad's voice cracked. "The truth is, we needed the money. Ryan was drowning. He should have learned to swim," I interrupted, my voice steady. "Instead, you taught him to pull others under." Ryan bristled. "Don't talk to me like I'm weak." "You're not weak," I said, "but the choices you made were cowardly." I didn't intend to say it, but once spoken, it felt like a weight I'd been carrying finally fell from my shoulders. I reached into the folder I brought, removed a copy of the forged deed, and placed it on the coffee table. The pages fluttered slightly, like even they wanted to run. "This signature," I said, tapping the ink, "is a felony." Dad stared at the paper as if it might turn to ash. "Claire," he said, voice trembling, "we didn't think." "No," I said, "you didn't." Silence sharp enough to cut. Then I said something I never rehearsed. "I'm not pressing charges." Ryan's head jerked up. "You're not." "No," I repeated. "Not because you don't deserve them, but because I don't want to spend the next year defining my life by what you took. I want to define it by what I build." Dad sagged into the nearest chair. "We were scared," he whispered. "When your mother died, everything fell apart. I didn't know how to be both parents. I thought, if I lost him too." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. "Pain doesn't need punctuation." "I can't fix what you did," I said, "but I can decide what happens next." The door opened behind us. The buyer and his wife stepped inside. Hayes, behind them, holding a folder like a shield. Ryan tensed. Dad stood up too fast, knocking his knee against the table. The buyer spoke gently. "We're not here to fight. We want to do what's right." Hayes cleared his throat. "There are two options. One, undo the sale and return the property legally to Lieutenant Dawson. Two, the sale stands, but with a legally mandated financial restitution that acknowledges her share and the forgery." Ryan stared at me like the floor had vanished. "You'd let us stay." "I'm not letting you stay," I said. "You already did. I'm choosing not to drag you through court." The woman with the baby stepped forward. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of holding someone else's anger. Because revenge can be quiet. Because justice doesn't always need applause." Out loud, I said, "Because I don't want a home built on punishment. I want a life built on peace." Dad looked at the ground. "What do we owe you?" "More than you can pay," I said. "But we'll start with a settlement Hayes will draft. After that, boundaries, real ones." Ryan's voice shook. "Will you ever forgive us?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But forgiveness doesn't start with asking. It starts with changing." Hayes nodded, satisfied. "We'll file the papers tomorrow." I turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. The porch where they laughed at me now felt different, still painful, but no longer a wound. More like a scar that proved I survived. As I walked down the steps, Dad called after me, "Claire." I turned. "Thank you," he said. Not with entitlement, not with expectation. Just gratitude, fragile as blown glass. I nodded once. "Take care of each other," I said. This time, without borrowing from someone else's future. Then I walked to my car. I didn't look back. Not because I was running from something, but because I was walking toward something else. A week passed before the settlement was finalized. 7 days of signatures, notarizations, courthouse corridors, and polite nods that held back centuries of human conflict. Hayes walked me through each step, explaining the legal language like a guide through a foreign country. Words like restitution and civil remedy became part of my vocabulary the way port side and aft once had. In the end, I didn't get the house back, but I got something else, something I didn't realize I needed more. Recognition, restitution, respect. My portion of the settlement wasn't massive. It wasn't enough to buy a mansion or reclaim everything that was taken, but it was enough to build a foundation, literally and figuratively. Hayes called it justice. I called it oxygen. One afternoon, he slid a final document across his desk. "It's done," he said. I stared at the page. My name printed neatly at the bottom alongside my father's and Ryan's. Their signatures this time were real shaky, uneven but honest. I could almost feel the tremor in their hands through the ink. Hayes leaned back. "You know, most people would have pushed for more." "Most people aren't me," I said. He smiled, not out of amusement, but respect. "What now?" I thought about it. Now I said I build. The piece of land I'd applied to buy still sat waiting for me, untouched, overlooked, and full of possibility. I used part of the settlement as a down payment, and within 2 weeks, a sign appeared at the edge of the property. "Coming soon. Future site of the Dawson residence." The lettering was crooked, hand-painted, and weathered within days by wind and rain. I loved it. Construction began quietly, not with a crew of contractors, but with help from veterans I'd met at the hospital. Earl showed up with a toolbox and a cane, his laugh echoing across the field. "Don't worry," he joked, "I'll supervise from this lawn chair. Best foreman you'll ever have." A retired CB volunteered to help assess the soil. A former Army engineer offered to blueprint a simple one-story home. A nurse from the VA donated a set of dishes she no longer used. Someone sent curtains. Someone else donated lumber. It wasn't charity, it was community. The first beam we anchored into the ground felt like a flag being raised. Not a flag of victory, a flag of return. Between hammer strikes and sawdust clouds, I found myself talking again. Not about the betrayal, but about everything else. The Navy, Pearl Harbor, my mother's favorite songs. The way grief sometimes feels like walking with stones in your pockets. The way healing sometimes feels like setting them down one pebble at a time. One afternoon, while measuring the frame for the front porch, I paused. I realized what I was building wasn't revenge. It was freedom. Earl noticed me staring off, thinking he asked. Remembering I said, and choosing. "That's all any of us can do," he said. "Remember the pain. Choose the future." In the evenings, I sat on the tailgate of my truck, watching the sun drop behind the pines. The VA loan paperwork sat beside me, along with a stack of volunteer schedules and grocery store receipts. It should have overwhelmed me, but instead, it grounded me. One night my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, heart steady. Then I typed back, "Yes, but not tonight." Another message I'm trying. I believed him, or at least I wanted to. Trying doesn't erase the past, but it acknowledges it. Trying is the first brick in rebuilding something broken. Ryan didn't text. He sent a letter instead, handwritten on lined paper torn from a notebook. His handwriting had always leaned too far to the right, like he was racing through his own sentences. He apologized. Not with excuses, just accountability. He wrote that he was attending financial responsibility classes, that he was working 2 jobs, that he understood I didn't owe him forgiveness, that he hoped someday I might consider it anyway. I folded the letter and placed it inside my mother's old recipe box, the only thing I had left from the house. I didn't know if I forgave him, But I knew I no longer felt the urge to hurt him. That was enough for now. Months passed. The house grew, beam by beam, frame by frame, like a hymn sung slowly and without instruments. The first night the roof was completed, the veterans held a small gathering plastic chairs, store-bought cake, a portable radio playing Sinatra. Earl raised a cup of lemonade. To Claire he said, "Who taught us that revenge can be a blueprint, not a bomb?" Everyone laughed. I shook my head. "To all of you," I said, "for teaching me that home isn't a place you inherit. It's a place you build." Later, as the stars blinked awake, I walked to the front of the house, or what would be the front. The porch wasn't sanded yet. The railing was temporary, but I could already picture mornings here. Coffee steaming in the cold air, birds chattering, the world quiet enough to hear myself think. I closed my eyes and imagined my mother standing beside me, not as a ghost, but as a memory rooted deeper than grief. "You'll serve the country, and this house will serve you," she had said. She was right, just not in the way either of us thought. One morning, Hayes visited the site. He stood with his hands in his pockets, nodding. "You did good," he said. "We did," I corrected him. He smiled. "What will you call it?" "The house." "I mean, some people name them." I thought about it. Then I pointed to the sign with the crooked letters. "Dawson House," I said. "It's simple, honest. Nothing stolen, nothing borrowed." Hayes tipped an imaginary hat. "Fitting," he said. As he walked away, something settled inside me. Not closure exactly, but peace. The kind that doesn't erase the past, but coexists with it. The real revenge wasn't winning. It wasn't getting even. It wasn't the house, or the money, or the truth finally spoken. It was this: they couldn't break me. I didn't need the house they stole. I needed to remember the person they couldn't take. And I did. The house took 9 months to finish. Not because of delays, or money, or permits, though all of those tried to stand in the way, but because healing is slow work. Some days, I measured beams with confidence. Some days, I held a hammer like it weighed 100 pounds. But every nail drove me a little further from the person who trembled on the driveway the day she came home. Every piece of wood, every coat of paint was a sentence in a story I was choosing to write. On the morning the house was finished enough to live in, at least I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by unpacked boxes. The windows were open, letting in a draft that smelled like pine and sunshine. The floors creaked under my boots, not with age, but because they were still learning how to bear weight. Kind of like me. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Dad stood there. No jacket, no rehearsed posture. Just him holding his hat in his hands, like it was something fragile. Behind him, Ryan waited in the yard, shoulders tight, eyes darting toward the truck like he was ready to retreat if I blinked the wrong way. "Can we come in?" Dad asked. I hesitated, not because I didn't want them here, but because I needed to be sure I wasn't letting them in out of habit. Finally, I stepped aside. Dad walked in slowly. He looked around, not inspecting, just absorbing. Ryan lingered at the threshold until Dad cleared his throat, and only then did he step in. "It's beautiful," Dad said. His voice cracked. "You built this." "With help," I said. Ryan's eyes moved to the framed Navy photo on the mantelme in uniform, the ocean stretching behind me like a promise kept. "We didn't know how to stand beside you when you left," he said. "And when you came back, we didn't know how to stand beside you then either." There was something in his tone, not self-pity, not an excuse, just truth spoken plainly. Dad took a breath. I can't undo what we did. I've said sorry 100 times in my head, but it didn't feel real until I could say it where you live. A person should apologize on the land they harmed. I leaned against the counter. You didn't just hurt me. You hurt what Mom left for me. Dad nodded. His eyes shone. I know, and I've thought about what she'd say every day since. I hope, if she saw me now, she'd know I'm trying to be someone she could still love. I let the silence stretch. Not a weapon this time, but a place for everything that needed air. Finally, I spoke. I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not soon. But I'm not holding the door shut anymore. If forgiveness comes, it'll come through what you do next, not what you did before. Ryan swallowed. I can live with that. We talked for an hour. Not about the house. Not about the settlement. Just life. The baby was walking now. Dad had joined a community group for grieving spouses. Ryan had gone 60 days without gambling. They both had started learning to swim, literally, at the YMCA. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Before they left, Dad asked if he could see the backyard. I led them to the porch, still smelling of fresh stain. The yard stretched behind us, like a canvas. Dad turned to me. This place feels like you, he said. Like the person you were always meant to be. It feels like home, I answered. The kind you build when no one's watching. They walked to their truck. Halfway across the yard, Ryan paused. If you ever need help around here, he said, even just moving boxes, call me. I mean it. I will, I said, and I meant it not as a promise, but as an opening. When they drove away, I didn't feel empty. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt balanced, like a scale had finally stopped tipping. Later, I stood on the porch with a mug of coffee. The sun dipped behind the pine's shadows, stretching across the yard. A breeze rustled through the grass, carrying the scent of something new. A life that belonged to me, not because anyone gave it to me, but because I claimed it. I thought about revenge, how people imagine it as fire or fury, a storm ripping through lives. But my revenge had become something else, a structure with windows and doors, built of wood, in forgiveness I hadn't fully granted, yet built of dignity, in boundaries, in a future I wasn't afraid to live in. I thought about the viewers, the strangers who might be listening to this story, sitting somewhere with their own betrayals pressing against their ribs. Maybe their families sold more than houses. Maybe they lost trust instead of deeds. Maybe their battles don't involve courtrooms, but quiet nights where sleep won't come. So I spoke aloud into the settling dusk, into the microphone of memory. Wherever you are, whatever you lost, you deserve a future that isn't written by the people who hurt you. You deserve a home that doesn't have to be a house. You deserve to rebuild, even if it takes longer than you hoped. And you deserve to remember that starting over isn't failing, it's choosing. A porch light clicked on automatically behind me, the one I had installed myself. A small thing, but small things I've learned are the architecture of a life. I looked at my home, the siding, the porch, the sign that still read Dawson House in uneven letters, and I smiled. Mom would have liked this. Maybe somewhere she does. If you're listening, if this story found you in a moment where you're standing in the ruins of something that was supposed to be safe, I hope it reminds you that you're not alone, that you're allowed to protect your peace, and that rebuilding is not the opposite of breaking. It's the answer to it. If this story meant something to you, even something small, I'd be honored if you'd stay for the next one. Share this with someone who needs it. or just sit with it a while until you feel ready to stand up again. You don't have to stand alone.